It is time to paint our pumpkins, and the technique I want to use is called pointillism. And you might be wondering why I have Q-tips. You can definitely use a paintbrush here, but a Q-tip is really going to give you that effect. So by the sound of the technique pointillism, you might have an idea of what we're going to do. So pointillism was a style of art that was invented in the 1800s, 1880 to about 1890, by an artist named George Seurat. And I actually nicknamed him George Seurat ... because it rhymes, and that's exactly what he did. He painted using dots, tiny little brushstrokes, and he would use contrasting colors to show the movement of light throughout his picture. So pointillism is the technique of painting in which small dots of color are applied to form an image. So what we're going to do on our pumpkin is you are going to choose your colors. You can paint your pumpkin any color you want. As I showed you, pumpkins come in all different colors. I am going to use warm colors just to show you this technique, and I have yellow, red, and orange, and I have Q-tips. So what I'm going to do, just like the pointillism movement did, is they use dots. So instead of taking your Q-tip and brushing, instead you're actually going to almost stamp it to create dots. And I want to also play with the light like the pointillist artist did. So I'm going to make sure not to mix my colors, because one of the things that these artists wanted to do is they wanted your eyes to actually mix the color instead of you mixing the color. So instead of mixing red and yellow to make orange, they would actually put red and yellow dots right next to each other. And when your eyes would look at the painting, your eyes would actually mix the color, and you would think that you were seeing the color orange. Now, these paintings that they did were huge paintings and tiny little dots. Some of these paintings took them years to finish. Now, it's not going to take us years to finish our painting, but remember that while you are painting, and again, you can do this with a paintbrush if you like, but I really like the look of the Q-tip. I think it really gives a nice dot, which is the look that we're going for. Remember George Seurat? I remember his name by Seurat ... He was basically the father of pointillism. So I have my red, and now with my other Q-tip, I am going to start adding some of the orange and some of the yellow. And now for the background, I thought it would be really neat to do a different technique. So this technique in the background we're going to do is called resist. And it can either be done with crayon or with oil pastel. And the concept behind it is actually a concept in science. Water and oil do not mix. So what's going to happen is I am going to use my oil pastels, and the wax from a crayon would work also. And I am going to start to color some of the patterns in the background. Once I've colored the patterns in the background, I am then going to use watercolor to paint over it. And what's going to happen is my oil pastel is going to separate and push its way forward through the watercolor, because the oil and the water will not mix, so the oil from the pastel will resist the paint and will show through. Now, if you're using crayons, you really have to press hard with the crayon to get that waxy finish so that it will resist the paint. So I'm just going to dip into my water, dip and drag, and I want to choose a color that is going to contrast with my oil pastel. So in this case, I've used a lot of the warm fall colors like browns and goldens, and I am going to use yellow for the background. With watercolor, you need water to color, so you need to make sure you really get that paint nice and watery, and I can just paint right over it. And what's going to happen is the oil pastel is going to resist the paint, so it won't cover up all of the work that I did with my oil pastel. And I'm going to let some areas be nice and light yellows, and some maybe have a darker value. One of the beauties of watercolor is that it's transparent. So you do want to allow the watercolor to do its work and allow some of the values to be nice and light, and some of them to be medium, and some of them to be dark. So over here where I did my little candy corn, maybe there I want to do more of maybe like a brown background. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that this is a crayon resist, or a resist. I'm using oil pastel, and it only works with water-based paint, because remember, the concept is that oil and water do not mix. So again, when I put the paint on top of my oil pastel, you can see how it starts to bubble in little sections. It beads up. The water beads and it doesn't penetrate. It does not go through the oil pastel or a heavy crayon waxy finish, because the oil in the crayon and the oil in the pastel are resisting the water in the watercolor. So if you were to use a different type of paint, it might not work the same way unless it is a water-based paint. Okay, so keep that in mind. Again, you can use crayon if you press really, really hard to get that waxy finish, or oil pastel and any water-based paint. I do like the watercolor because it does, like I say, give value, lights, mediums, and darks, and it's very forgiving. And what I mean by that is you can see how quickly I'm painting over my oil pastel, because I know it's not going to cover up any of that hard work that I did, because my oil pastel is going to resist it. So there you go. I am trying to stick to warm fall autumn colors. We've got Pointillism and we've got Resist. I hope you enjoy it. I am going to finish it off, and I can't wait to see what you produce.